I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd fall in love again at 46, especially not after what happened. The kind of violation that makes your stomach drop and your skin crawl. The kind that changes how you see your home, your neighborhood, your sense of safety. But here I am, sitting at my kitchen table in suburban Massachusetts, staring out at the maple trees in my backyard as they shed their autumn leaves, writing down a story that began with betrayal, but somehow blossomed into something beautiful. It started a year ago. I'd just turned 45, was freshly divorced after 18 years of marriage, and had finally started to feel like I was finding my footing in this new chapter of my life. The divorce wasn't bitter. Robert and I had simply grown apart, two people who'd married young and evolved in different directions. He moved to Seattle for a tech job. I kept the colonial-style house we'd bought together in Lexington. Our daughter Mia was in her second year at UC Berkeley, thriving in ways that made the empty nest a little more bearable. The neighbors had been kind throughout the transition. Casseroles appeared on my doorstep during those first raw weeks. Invitations to book clubs and community garden meetings followed. But I kept mostly to myself, finding comfort in solitude after years of compromising and considering another person's needs before my own. I renovated parts of the house, painted the dining room a deep teal that Robert would have hated, installed a security system with cameras that made me feel safer living alone. And then Sam moved in next door. The Hendersons had lived in that craftsman-style house for 20 years before retiring to Florida. It sold quickly, and one weekend in April, a moving truck appeared, followed by a silver Audi with Massachusetts plates. I brought over a basket of muffins the next day, a neighborhood tradition I couldn't quite abandon, and that's when I met him. "You must be Elizabeth," he said, before I'd even introduced myself. His smile was disarming, his eyes a startling shade of blue against olive skin and dark hair peppered with silver at the temples. "The Hendersons told me about you, said you're the heart of Maple Avenue." I laughed at that. I think they were being generous. I'm hardly the neighborhood welcome committee. "Well, you're here with muffins, so their intel seems accurate." He extended his hand. "Sam Kaplan, divorced tech consultant who's hoping to finally put down some roots." Something about his directness, the way he led with his divorce status like it was a job title, caught me off guard. In retrospect, I should have recognized it for what it was. A tactic, a way of establishing common ground before I'd even mentioned my own situation. Elizabeth Chen, also divorced, former marketing director, current freelance graphic designer working from home. I handed him the basket. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "Working from home, huh? Me too. Maybe we can be each other's water cooler sometimes. I've heard isolation is the downside of the freelance life." I nodded, not committing to anything but appreciating the casual offer. He was attractive, yes, and for the first time since my divorce, I felt that flutter of possibility. Maybe this was the universe sending someone new my way, someone who might understand the particular challenges of rebuilding a life after a long marriage. Over the next few weeks, Sam and I developed an easy friendship. Coffee on his back deck when the spring mornings were mild enough. Dog-sitting his golden retriever, Rusty, when he had meetings in Boston. He helped me install a patio swing and laughed at my stubborn insistence on doing most of it myself. I found myself looking forward to our casual encounters, the way he seemed genuinely interested in my work, my thoughts, my life. One evening in May, he invited me over for dinner. "Nothing fancy," he promised. "Just grilled salmon and whatever vegetables look good at the farmer's market tomorrow." I hesitated, feeling the shift from neighborly friendship to something that felt more like a date. "That sounds lovely," I said finally, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Dinner was indeed lovely. Sam was an attentive host and a surprisingly good cook. We sat on his back deck as twilight settled over the neighborhood, talking about books we loved, places we wanted to travel, the strange liberation and loneliness of post-divorce life. When he reached across the table to brush a strand of hair from my face, I didn't pull away. "I like you, Elizabeth," he said, his voice soft in the gathering darkness. More than I expected to when I moved here. I like you too, I admitted, feeling simultaneously like a teenager and a woman who had survived enough to know her own mind. When he kissed me goodbye at my door later that night, I felt hopeful in a way I hadn't in years. That's when my laptop started acting strangely. It was nothing dramatic at first, just running slower than usual, battery draining faster. I blamed it on age. The MacBook was nearly 4 years old. But then, one night, while I was working late on a project, the camera light came on by itself. Just for a moment, a tiny green glow in the corner of my screen. There and then, gone. I stared at it, suddenly cold in my warm house, then reached for a post-it note and covered the camera. The next day, I mentioned it casually to Sam when he came over with coffee. Probably just a software glitch, he said, stirring honey into his tea. But I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. I used to work in cybersecurity before going freelance. I hesitated. My laptop contained my entire professional life, client files, designs, contracts. And despite our growing closeness, I wasn't quite ready to hand over that level of access. Maybe, I said. Let me think about it. No pressure, he replied easily. Just an offer from a neighbor with the right skill set. Leaned in to kiss me, a casual gesture that was becoming wonderfully familiar. I pushed my concerns aside, letting myself enjoy the simple pleasure of connection. A week later, my home security app notified me that one of my cameras was offline. It was the one above the back door, the most secluded entry point to my house. I followed the troubleshooting steps, but nothing worked. The next day, 2 more cameras were down. You're being paranoid, I told myself as I called the security company. They ran diagnostics, found nothing obviously wrong, and scheduled a technician to come out the following week. I wasn't satisfied. Something felt off, like the subtle shift in air pressure before a storm. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house settling made me tense under my covers. Finally, around 2 a.m, I got up, made a cup of chamomile tea, and opened my laptop, the one with the post-it still firmly in place over its camera, to distract myself with mindless internet browsing. A file caught my eye. It was in a folder where I kept client projects, but I didn't recognize the name. ELC_home. I clicked it open. The screen filled with images of me, cooking in my kitchen, me reading on the couch, me stepping out of the shower, a towel wrapped around my body. Worse, me and Sam together on my couch, our first kiss, our whispered conversations. The timestamps showed dates going back 3 months. My tea mug hit the floor and shattered, hot liquid, splashing my bare feet, but I barely felt it. I scrolled through image after image, video clip after video clip, my entire private life captured through the very cameras I'd installed to protect myself. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bitter bile. Then I sat on the cold tile floor, shaking, trying to think through the fog of violation and fear. I thought about calling the police, but what would I show them? Files on my own computer? They could have been downloaded from anywhere. I needed proof of who had done this, but I already knew, or at least I had my suspicions. The next morning, I called in sick to my client meetings and drove to a Best Buy 2 towns over, where nobody knew me. I bought a new laptop, paid cash, and took it to a cafe with free Wi-Fi. There, I created new email accounts and changed every password I could think of. Then I researched how to check for spyware and remote access programs. 3 days later, after learning more about network security than I ever wanted to know, I had my answer. Someone had gained access to my home network, likely through a vulnerability in my router. They had been able to access not just my security cameras, but my laptop as well. The invasion was complete and thorough. I still didn't have definitive proof it was Sam, but the timing aligned too perfectly. The problems had started shortly after he moved in. His background in cybersecurity, his convenient proximity, the way he'd known my name before I introduced myself. I considered my options. Moving wasn't financially viable, not without selling the house, which would take time. Going to the police still felt premature without concrete evidence linking Sam to the breach. Confronting him directly seemed dangerous if my suspicions were correct. In the end, I chose a different path. I would gather my evidence methodically, carefully, and then I would make him face what he'd done. I hired an independent cybersecurity expert, paying in cash again, giving only my first name. Amanda was in her early 30s, with purple hair and a no-nonsense attitude that immediately put me at ease. She didn't ask why I didn't go to the police, just listened to my story and nodded. "This happens more often than you'd think," she said, her fingers already flying over her keyboard. "And you're right to be cautious about accusing someone without proof. Let's see what we can find." Over the next 2 weeks, Amanda helped me set up a honeypot, a system that looked vulnerable but was actually monitoring for intrusion attempts. We installed new security cameras that fed to a separate secure network. And we waited. During this time, I maintained my routine. I chatted with Sam when we crossed paths, even accepted another dinner invitation, forcing myself to smile and laugh and pretend nothing had changed. Each interaction made my skin crawl, but I kept my face neutral, channeling every acting class I'd taken in. College, the evidence, when it came, was unequivocal. Amanda traced the intrusions directly back to Sam's IP address. He had been accessing my cameras, downloading the footage, and had installed keylogging software on my old laptop that recorded everything I typed. He had access to my emails, my bank accounts, my entire digital life. "You have enough to go to the police now," Amanda said, her face grim as she showed me the logs. "This is criminal behavior, Elizabeth. Multiple federal laws broken." I nodded, staring at the strings of code on her screen that represented such a profound violation. "I will," I promised. "But first, I need to confront him myself." Amanda argued against this, of course, said it wasn't safe, that I should let the authorities handle it. But she didn't understand what it's like to have your sanctuary violated, to know that someone had been watching your most intimate moments without consent. This wasn't just about justice through proper channels. This was about reclaiming my power, my space, my sense of self. I waited until Friday evening, the night Sam had invited me to a concert in Boston. It was a perfect June evening, the kind that usually made me grateful to live in New England. The fireflies were just beginning to emerge at dusk as I walked next door, a USB drive in my pocket, containing all the evidence Amanda had gathered. Sam answered the door with a smile, dressed for our date in a blue button-down that matched his eyes. "Elizabeth, you're early. I was just about to come get you." "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "May I come in?" He hesitated, just for a moment, before stepping aside. "Of course. Is everything okay?" The fact that he could still play this role, still pretend to care about my well-being even now, made something harden inside me. "No, everything is not okay, and you know exactly why." I sat on his leather sofa, the same one where we'd shared takeout and conversations about books and travel, and gradually opening our hearts again. He sat across from me in an armchair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes watchful. "I know what you've been doing," I said without preamble. "The cameras, my laptop, all of it." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Not surprise or shame, calculation. "I'm not sure what you're talking about, Elizabeth," I pulled out the USB drive and placed it on the coffee table between us. "Everything's here, the access logs, the timestamps, the files you downloaded. I've already given copies to people I trust, so don't think about trying to take this and destroy it." For a long moment, he just looked at the small black drive. Then he sighed, leaned back in his chair. "It's not what you think." "Isn't it? Because I think you moved in next door, gained my trust, and then systematically invaded my privacy in the most violating way possible. I think you watched me in my most private moments without my knowledge or Consent. I think you're a predator who hides behind a charming smile and a helpful neighbor act. He flinched at the word predator, the first genuine reaction I'd seen. It started as a security challenge, he said, his voice quiet. Just to see if I could, and then. And then what? You couldn't stop? You enjoyed it too much? What possible explanation could make this okay? I fell in love with you, he said, his eyes meeting mine. The real you, not the polished version you show the world. The you who sings off key when you think no one's listening, who cries at dog food, commercials, who talks to your plants when you water them. My stomach turned. The idea that he thought this was love, that violating my privacy was somehow a pathway to knowing the real me, was perhaps the most disturbing part of all. That's not love, Sam. That's obsession. That's control. That's taking something that wasn't yours to take. He leaned forward, his face earnest. I never shared the footage with anyone. I never would have hurt you. I just wanted to be close to you, and you kept everyone at arm's length, even me. That was my choice to make. My voice rose despite my determination to stay calm. My boundaries to set. You don't get to decide they're inconvenient and just bypass them. I know that now, he said quickly. I got carried away. But we can move past this. I'll delete everything, I swear. No one else needs to know. I stood up, unable to bear being in his presence any longer. The police need to know. My lawyer needs to know. The neighborhood association needs to know exactly who's living among them. Fear flickered across his face for the first time. Elizabeth, please. My career would be over. I could go to prison. You should have thought about that before you decided to spy on me. I moved toward the door, then turned back. I'm filing a police report tomorrow morning. I suggest you use the time to find yourself a good attorney. As I walked back to my house in the gathering darkness, I felt a curious mixture of emotions. Anger, certainly. Disgust. But also a strange sense of lightness, of reclamation. He had taken my sense of security, my privacy, my trust. But in confronting him, I had begun the process of taking it all back. The legal proceedings that followed were exhausting and often humiliating. Despite my lawyer's best efforts to protect my privacy, details of the case made their way through our small community. Some neighbors looked at me with pity, others with a morbid curiosity that made me want to scream. A few even suggested I had somehow invited this invasion by being a single woman living alone, as if my divorce had hung a sign on my door saying, "Surveillance welcome here." Sam took a plea deal rather than go to trial. 3 years probation, community service, mandatory counseling, and a restraining order that would remain in effect long after he moved away from Maple Avenue, which he did within a month of our confrontation. In the weeks following Sam's departure, I found myself unable to stay in my own home for more than a few hours without feeling suffocated by memories of being watched. I'd walk from room to room, remembering specific moments he had captured. Me dancing in the kitchen to Fleetwood Mac while making dinner, crying on the phone with Mia about her breakup with her college boyfriend, even that vulnerable moment when I'd stood in front of the bathroom mirror examining the new wrinkles around my eyes, wondering if I'd ever feel desirable again. Each memory felt tainted, now retroactively changed from private moments of authenticity into performances for an audience I never knew I had. I started staying with my sister Janet in Concord, making the 30-minute commute back to Lexington only when necessary for client meetings I couldn't conduct remotely. It was during one of those unavoidable trips home that I first met him. I'd stopped at the local hardware store to pick up supplies for a leaky faucet, determined to fix at least one broken thing in my life, when I literally bumped carts with a tall, gray-haired man with kind eyes and a smile that crinkled the corners of his face. "I'm so sorry," I said, jumping back. I'd been so lost in my own thoughts, I hadn't noticed him turning the corner. "Entirely my fault," he insisted, in a voice that was warm and steady. "I was distracted by the fascinating world of pipe fittings." He gestured to the bewildering array of copper and PVC pieces on the shelf beside us. Despite everything, I smiled. They are mesmerizing, aren't they? Do you actually know what any of them do? Not a clue, he admitted cheerfully. I'm just following the instructions in a YouTube video that promised me I could fix my sink in 5 easy steps. I'm on step 3 and already considering calling a professional. At least you made it to step 3, I said. I'm still on step 1. Buy the things in the picture. He laughed, and something inside me eased. Just a fraction. It had been so long since I'd had a simple human interaction that wasn't shadowed by what had happened. I'm Michael, he said, offering his hand. Perpetually confused homeowner. Elizabeth, I replied, shaking it. Equally confused, but stubbornly determined homeowner. Maybe we could be confused together, he suggested. Compare notes, commiserate when our pipes inevitably spring leaks despite our best efforts. In another time, I might have said yes immediately. But now there was a new wariness in me, a hesitation born of betrayal. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm going through some things right now, not really in a place for anything, really. I expected him to be offended or to push harder. Instead, he nodded, his expression understanding without being pitying. Fair enough. But if you change your mind or just want someone to call when your DIY project goes sideways, I'm in the book. Michael Harmon. Old-fashioned that way. He smiled again, that genuine, crinkly-eyed smile, and then pushed his cart past me with a small wave. I watched him go, feeling something I couldn't quite name. Not attraction, exactly, though he was undeniably attractive in a solid, comfortable way. Maybe it was simply recognition of decency, of someone who could hear no and accept it without question. I didn't call him, not for 3 months, but I thought about him occasionally, especially when my sink started leaking again despite my repairs. There was something restful about the memory of our brief encounter, something uncomplicated that stood in stark contrast to the tangled mess of my recent past. It was Janet who finally pushed me. You can't hide forever, she said one evening, as we sat on her back porch, watching fireflies rise from the tall grass at the edge of her property. Her voice was gentle but firm, the same tone she'd used when we were girls, and I needed pushing to stand up for myself. That house is yours, your life is yours, and you're allowed to let people in again, carefully, on your terms, but still in. I nodded, sipping the herbal tea she'd made. Janet had always been the strong one, the one who spoke her mind, who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. I'd always been the cautious sister, the one who checked for exits in crowded rooms, who had emergency funds hidden in 3 different banks. Yet all my caution hadn't protected me from Sam. I know, I said finally, but every time I think about starting over, about trusting someone new, I feel sick. That's normal, she said, but you can't let him take that from you too. Start small. Remember that hardware store guy you mentioned? The one with the plumbing problems? Maybe just coffee. In public on your terms. That night, lying in Janet's guest room, I couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in my mind. Start small, on your terms. By morning, I had reached for my phone and dialed the number I'd looked up but never called. Hello? His voice was thick with sleep. I glanced at the clock, 6:30 a.m. I'd been so lost in my own thoughts, I hadn't considered the time. I'm so sorry, I said quickly. It's Elizabeth, from the hardware store, with the leaky faucet. I'll call back later. Elizabeth, he repeated, sounding more awake now. The determined DIYer, I remember. And don't worry about the time. I was just getting up anyway. How's the faucet? Still leaking, actually, I admitted. Turns out I'm better at graphic design than plumbing. He laughed. That warm sound I'd remembered on and off for months. Well, we can't all be Renaissance people. How can I help? I was wondering if that offer to compare notes was still open, I said, my heart racing with an anxiety that had nothing to do with attraction, and everything to do with fear. Maybe coffee this weekend? There was a pause, just long enough for me to start regretting the call, before he replied, I'd like that very much. How about Saturday at Lexington Coffee? Say on? I'll be there, I said, already planning where I would sit. Back to the wall, clear view of exits, and what I would wear, something casual but confidence-boosting. The coffee date was surprisingly easy. Michael was as kind in extended conversation as he had been in our brief meeting. He talked about his work as a history professor at Boston College, his divorce 10 years earlier, his 2 adult children now living in Chicago and Portland. He asked questions about my design work, my interests, my favorite places in Lexington, but never pushed when I gave vague answers about my recent past. My sister thinks I should get out more, I admitted over my second cappuccino. She's probably right, but it's been complicated. Sisters usually are right, in my experience, he said with a smile. But at your own pace. No rush. That became our refrain over the weeks that followed. No rush. At your pace. We had coffee again, then lunch at a cafe with outdoor seating where I felt less trapped. He helped me find a reliable plumber for my persistent leak. I designed a flyer for a community lecture series he was organizing. Small steps. Building blocks of normalcy in a life that had been fractured by betrayal. The first time he came to my house, I was a mess of anxiety. I'd spent the day checking and rechecking my new security system, installed by a company Amanda had recommended. I'd moved furniture, rearranged art, painted walls, trying to reclaim spaces that had been violated, to make them mine again. You've done a lot with the place, he said, looking around my living room, taking in the deep crimson walls that had once been beige, the new arrangement of furniture that bore no resemblance to what had been captured in Sam's footage. Needed a change, I said simply. He nodded, not pressing for details I wasn't ready to give. We cooked dinner together in my kitchen, another space I was reclaiming inch by inch. He was a better cook than I was, confident with spices and timing in a way I envied. As we worked side by side, chopping vegetables and stirring sauces, I found myself relaxing, the constant vigilance easing as the evening went on. After dinner, sitting on my couch with glasses of wine, I finally told him, not everything, not the most intimate details of what had been captured, but enough. About Sam, the cameras, the violation. About my ongoing efforts to rebuild my sense of safety, my reluctance to trust. He listened without interrupting, his face registering anger on my behalf, but never pity. Never that awful look of someone wondering what I'd done to invite such an invasion. I understand now, he said when I'd finished. Why you were hesitant that day at the store. Why you take things slowly. Thank you for trusting me with this. I'm still a work in progress, I warned him. There are good days and bad days. Times when I can't bear to be touched, when every unexpected sound makes me jump, when I check my phone for security alerts a dozen times an hour. We're all works in progress, he said, reaching slowly for my hand, telegraphing his movements so I could pull away if I needed to. I didn't. His palm was warm against mine, steady. Some just have steeper hills to climb than others. That became our pattern over the months that followed. Careful steps forward, honest conversations about boundaries and triggers, building trust brick by brick, with no shortcuts, no assumptions. I told him about my therapy sessions, the support group for victims of stalking and digital crimes I'd joined, the way I was reclaiming my life by small degrees. He shared his own past struggles with anxiety after his divorce, the panic attacks that had blindsided him in the grocery store, the therapy that had helped him rebuild. We were two people who had been broken in different ways, finding comfort in each other's careful reconstruction. The first time we kissed, really kissed, was 6 months after that coffee date. We were walking through the conservation land near my house, autumn leaves crunching beneath our boots, when I stopped suddenly, overcome by a realization. I feel safe with you, I said, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess them. I just realized I haven't been checking over my shoulder for the past hour. I haven't thought about escape routes or who might be watching. I'm just here, with you. The look on his face, tender, honored, but not triumphant, told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man he was. "That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me," he replied softly. I reached for him then, standing on tiptoe to press my lips to his. It wasn't our first kiss. We'd shared brief, gentle ones at doorways and over restaurant tables. But it was the first one that felt like a beginning, rather than a careful experiment. The first one where I wasn't braced for panic to follow desire. 6 more months passed, seasons turning, my life gradually reknitting itself into something new. Michael became a steady presence, patient on my bad days, joyful on my good ones. He understood why I still sometimes woke gasping from nightmares, why I still checked my security cameras from my phone, why I still sometimes needed to be alone in my space, reassuring myself that it was truly mine again. I've started dating again, cautiously. It happened by accident, really. Me healing enough to recognize the possibility of love again, him being steadfast enough to wait until I was ready. David, that's his full name, Michael David Harmon, has become the most unexpected chapter in a story I thought had ended with violation and fear. When he first came to my house, he noticed the security cameras, the new locks, the way I checked my phone for security alerts before inviting him in. He didn't comment, didn't make me feel paranoid. And when I flinched slightly the first time he reached to brush hair from my face, an involuntary reaction born not of fear of him, but of all the vulnerability that intimacy requires, he pulled back immediately, attuned to my boundaries in a way that made my eyes fill with tears of relief. "We can go as slow as you need," he said. "Or not at all. Your comfort is what matters here." I'd forgotten that people like this existed. People who saw boundaries as something to be respected rather than overcome. People who understood that trust must be earned, not demanded or stolen. I still haven't let him stay overnight. That level of vulnerability still feels too raw, too soon. But last week, I fell asleep on the couch while we were watching a movie, my head on his shoulder, Bailey snoring at our feet. Did I mention Bailey? A mixed-breed rescue dog with one blue eye and one brown, who barks at anything unusual and sleeps at the foot of my bed each night. Michael helped me adopt her, another piece of my healing. I woke 2 hours later to find he'd turned off the TV and covered me with the throw blanket, then sat back down exactly as he'd been, letting me rest without disturbing me. He was reading a book on his phone, the soft blue light illuminating his profile. I studied him for a moment before he noticed I was awake, this kind man who waited patiently for me to feel safe. "You could have woken me," I murmured, sitting up and stretching. "You looked peaceful," he said simply. "I didn't want to take that from you." It was such a stark contrast to Sam, who had taken my peace without a second thought, that I had to blink back tears again. I'm still learning to accept kindness without suspicion, still reminding myself that not everyone is hiding predatory intentions behind a charming smile. Beyond my cautious steps back into love, I've found purpose in sharing my story with women's groups and cybersecurity forums, hoping it might help others protect themselves or recognize the warning signs I missed. I've spoken at 2 high schools about digital safety and privacy, watching teenage girls exchange knowing glances when I described the subtle red flags I'd ignored with Sam. I wonder how many of them have already experienced violations of their own. How many are currently being watched, recorded, tracked without their knowledge. Each time I speak, I receive messages afterward. Women thanking me for giving them courage to leave. Controlling relationships, to check their devices for spyware, to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. It doesn't erase what happened to me, but it weaves meaning from the pain, creates something useful from the trauma. Mia comes home from college more often now, worried about me, despite my assurances that I'm okay. She's changed her major from pre-med to computer science, with a focus on cybersecurity, inspired partly by what happened to me and partly by long conversations with Amanda, who's become something of a mentor to her. She likes Michael, watches him carefully with the protective instinct of a daughter who has seen her mother wounded, but has gradually relaxed as she's seen how he respects my boundaries, how he celebrates my strength rather than trying to fix me. "He's good for you, Mom," she said during her last visit home, as we watched him grilling in the backyard, laughing with Janet's husband about some shared dad joke. "He sees you." The irony of that phrase wasn't lost on either of us. Sam had watched me, but never truly seen me. Michael sees me, my strength, my scars, my ongoing journey toward wholeness, and loves what he sees. Last night, Michael asked if I would consider moving in with him when his lease ends next month. Not into my house, with its complicated history, but into a new place we would choose together. A fresh start. A home that has never been violated, never been anything but ours. "No rush," he added, true to our refrain. "And not at all if you're not ready. I just wanted you to know it's what I hope for." I haven't given him an answer yet. Part of me wants to say yes immediately, to leave behind the house where my privacy was so thoroughly invaded. But another part hesitates to leave the home I've reclaimed inch by inch, the space where I've fought so hard to feel safe again. Some days are harder than others. Today is one of the hard ones, which is why I'm writing this all down. My therapist suggested it might help to tell the whole story from beginning to end, to put it outside myself where I can look at it objectively, to recognize that while this happened to me, it doesn't define me. That my story didn't end with violation, but continues with healing, with unexpected love, with possibilities I couldn't have imagined in those dark days after I discovered what Sam had done. Today was hard because I ran into Mrs. Henderson at the grocery store, visiting from Florida. She asked about Sam, whether we'd ever gotten together, like she'd hoped when she sold him the house. "Such a nice man," she said, her voice bright with nostalgia. "So good with computers." He helped us set up our whole smart home system before we moved. I stood in the produce section, holding a bundle of asparagus, unsure what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, how her nice neighbor had terrorized me, how his skill with computers had been weaponized against me. But what good would it do? She was in her 70s, happy in her retirement community, proud of her matchmaking attempt. Why shatter her belief in her own judgment? "We weren't a good match," I said finally, a masterpiece of understatement. "How's Florida treating you?" The exchange left me shaken, reminded me how successfully Sam had cultivated his image as the perfect neighbor, the helpful friend. How even now, a year later, most people who knew him would never believe what he'd done. The few neighbors who know the full story still sometimes look at me with doubt in their eyes, as if wondering if I'd overreacted, if perhaps there had been a misunderstanding. I came home to find Michael waiting on my porch swing, a simple bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. "Bad day?" he asked, seeing my expression as I walked up the path. I nodded, dropping my grocery bags to sit beside him. Ran into someone who knew Sam. It brought it all back. He didn't try to fix it with platitudes, didn't tell me it was all in the past, didn't urge me to just move on. Instead, he handed me the flowers and said, "Why don't you tell me about it while I make dinner? Those groceries look like they want to become pasta primavera." So I did. I told him about Mrs. Henderson, about the uncomfortable memories her innocent questions had triggered, about the frustration of knowing Sam still moved through the world appearing normal to most.